You'll all recognise him from the Antique Roadshow. He's very kindly come here. He's doing this for free and gratis, so all the funds will go towards the Mudlarking exhibitions, and we really, really appreciate that, because we're not funded, so it really, really helps us to put these exhibitions on. You used to be a mudlark?
I was, and I'm going to bang on about it. Talking about myself is one of my better things.
So we're here for.
Yes.
He also is doing a talk at the Society of Antiquaries in Halloween.
Yes, at Burlington House, the Society of Antiquaries asked me to give a talk about charm stones and amulets on Halloween, when the veil between the two worlds is at its thinnest. So there we are. And it's centred on a very particular charm stone, which is a rock crystal ball bound in silver from the Elizabethan era. But the rock crystal ball may be even Iron Age, but that's all coming later. And I was lucky enough to buy this thing, and I always thought it had a sort of faintly supernatural charge to it. And anyway, by an utter fluke, I managed to take the provenance back to the 18th century, and where it belonged to an antiquary, a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries, who wrote a book about how to dig up barrows and turf skeletons out, all those good things. And anyway, beside it in pencil is a little note beside it, and it says "spirit tapping." So come on the 31st, leave your broomsticks in the hall, and we'll go on from there. Anyway,
I'm going to leave Geoffrey to it.
Brilliant. That's all online anyway, but it is again a fundraising thing for the Society of Antiquaries. But anyway, seek and ye shall find, mudlarking without the mud. So, well, it can be done, and I'm going to demonstrate how it is, but on the table there, you're going to see some rather pathetic little offerings from me that I scraped out of the riverbed as early as 17 years ago. And I was walking across Lambeth Bridge, and I saw a clay pipe. I think you've got clay pipes, you people, haven't you? Yes. Anyway, I thought I might like to have that, so I walked down onto the mud and suddenly realised I was in the presence of an archaeological site, really, and that there was all kinds of wonderful things to be found, and some of them you'll see here. These I find the most interesting. In fact, I think we can see it without the flag, good luck. No, we can't. Sorry, back again. No, there they are. And they're pieces of Kangxi porcelain, and they were in the mud. And the thing about porcelain is that it's extraordinarily hard, and when one finds it in the river, it's almost the same as when one pulls it out of the river. These were found under the window of the Palace of Westminster, and they date from the 17th century. And the miracle of them, I think, is that they were painted in China, painted and fired in China, and then brought in a wooden junk all the way to London to be retailed, presumably, to the court that was present at the Palace of Westminster. So we could say it isn't fanciful at all to say that King James II could have eaten off these plates. Well, they would have been in the same room probably as him, and if not even a little earlier than that. And so they were broken, and somebody just pitched them into the river. And that, I think, is a provenance, a sort of very exciting universal provenance, isn't it? Because one side of the world to the other, and a royal provenance, because it is a palace. It's the most venerable palace in the United Kingdom. There's none older than the Palace of Westminster. And there they are, little people with their pagodas and little Buddha figure with a palm there, painted in China. So that's what hooked me. But I think you chaps have absolutely superseded me, because it's gone mad, and very happily gone mad, because it's so exciting what you're up to. And when this talk was suggested to me, I thought I can't possibly compete. I mean, I've got one clay pipe, you've got others, and there's wood curlers and this, that and the other. So what I thought, I'd cook up this little stratagem, which was mudlarking without the mud. And of course I am trained as an antique dealer. When I was 19, I answered an advertisement in the newspaper saying assistant required in well-known antique shops. I was brought up in Stenning. I had a Beatles haircut and a Burton suit with flared trouser bottoms. I was 19 years old. I'd never met anybody in my entire life, and within 3 months I'd met Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby and the King of Greece, and so that was a baptism of fire. So that has to be said. It's not just name dropping, although it is. It just puts a background into what you'll see later on. It was an extraordinary voyage of discovery. And I suppose we're watching, looking, hunting all the time, but certain objects are so remarkable to me, and when they were within my financial remit, which wasn't very often, I try and get them, and I'm going to show you the first one. There it is, and this is a neoclassical shaped ring with an ivory plaque and a painting of King Edward IV, and as you can read perfectly plainly, he died on April the 9th, 1483. Now this is the brother of Richard III and the father of the princes in the Tower, and he was twice king. Being king once is one thing, but being king twice is rather careless, I think. But anyway, that's what happened to him, and a hugely important historic person. But it came up under the hammer, and I said rather menacingly to the auctioneer, I said, "What is the surface of the paint like?" And so he took a lens out and he said, "Well, it looks like straw." But it isn't straw at all, it's the hair of King Edward IV. And maybe this will work. No, I'm not sure it will actually. Anyway, and any tech I touch, it falls apart. Everything. Which one do I press? That one there. It's on. It's on now. Right. Okay. So no, still not happening. Oh, there it is. I've got it. So anyway, thank you. I told you it all failed. So and it is the hair of King Edward IV that's been worked up in the manner of the 18th century, and you can see here that that's a single thread of his hair, but these lozenge-shaped things are scrunched up, cut hair. And now you're saying, what on earth? I don't really believe it. You're all saying I don't believe it, and why would you not believe it? But the tomb of Edward IV was at Windsor, and by accident they busted into his catafalque in 1789. And there was a weird fashion at this time to have a good gawp at royal corpses. It's not what everybody wants to do, but anyway. And so they had a good look, and they took hair from his head and a file of disgusting putrefying material, which was at the Society of Antiquaries, and walked away. And then the locks of this hair was distributed amongst what must have been enormously elite. You wouldn't expect to own this unless you were a prominent person. And so that's the history of that one. And it turned up under the hammer, and I did actually get it, because it turned out that the surface area was not paint, but it was this hair of an anointed king. That may be relevant in a minute, and I'll talk a bit more about it. So that was a bit of a bruiser financially, and so there was no carpet in the house at the time, for quite some time afterwards. And then, just as if things couldn't get any worse, within months this had turned up, and it's a sheaf of red hair. It's a ring, it's a tiny thing, set against ivory, and it was almost, it was a great surprise to me what this was, because this is the hair of Mary Tudor, Queen of France. This is not Bloody Mary, Mary First. This is the sister of Henry VIII. And she was married to Louis XII of France, and he was 42 years older than her, which wasn't a great deal for her. But happily, he was dead within 8 months, so she got off the hook, so to speak. Anyway, and if the hook was there, which I doubt. Anyway, the thing is that, she then was free-ish to marry, but of course she was a perfectly respectable Queen Consort of France, and the sister of the reigning sovereign of England, hot stuff, good pawn for her brother to pass off to another sovereign, a political pawn, but she snuck off and married the Duke of Suffolk, Charles Brandon, and the king was only pacified by this because it was his sister. He decided not to knock her head off, but accepted an enormous diamond in lieu of her treachery, which it was, and called the Mirror of Portugal, I think. That would solve almost everything, wouldn't it, girls? Anyway, and so when she went to live in Suffolk and died rather young, and so she was put into the monastery of Bury St Edmunds, and then the king decided to dissolve the monastery, and so the poor old thing was then shunted across to the church opposite in Bury St Edmunds, where she lies to this day. But in 1785, they did the same trick of opening up her coffin and having a look. And they took snippets of her hair. And so this is the hair of the sister of Henry VIII and the Dowager Queen of France. So pretty hot stuff. Turned up at auction. I was ruined, frankly. I mean, you know, it really was a Tupperware for a long time at lunch. Anyway, so now so we're talking about discoveries. There's no squelching Wellington boots, no whiffy things to wash when you get back, and that's one advantage. But you can find these things at very low cost price, like no cost price. The excitement is the same. These are valuable objects, but there was no point in me showing you my pathetic little discoveries because you found better things. So I thought I'd do this. This has got an interesting history because I was doing a valuation for a property magnate his wife's probate valuation, and we went off to the bank, and to be perfectly honest, it was extremely valuable and very dull. That can happen. And so I was ploughing my way through all these bracelets and God knows what, and almost at the end I saw this hanging from his late wife's bracelet, and I said to him, Harry, that is a 16th century gold pomander, and we might be able to unscrew it, which we did, and with luck we might see that. No, sorry. Unscrew it, we might see the original fragrance inside, which we did, and we found it there. So I explained to him what it was, and he was a bit of an antiquary, and he said, my dear boy, he said, without you and your knowledge, this would undoubtedly be cast into the melting pot. So will you do me the honour of accepting it as a gift? So I said, well, I did do him the honour as it happened. So I really did. Anyway, and so that wasn't, you know, the exciting thing. I thought it was a pomander, a hanging pomander, and I was quite pleased with all of that. But actually, the next slide rather blew it, I think. This is another view of it. It's in the form of a stylized pomegranate, and the scent comes through the filigree. I'm still looking for there he is. This is a man called Peregrine Bertie. I wish I was called Peregrine Bertie rather than Munn, but anyway. But there he is, and he's wearing what very similar objects. I can't say they are the same, and particularly as the top one's obscured by his ruff. I'm not saying it is the thing, but there's this fashion for these enormous buttons, and so I knew my pomander was actually a button, which was a revelation. He was a very fierce Protestant and jolly nearly got burned to death as a result. But anyway, Peregrine Bertie, and then we're going to see the inside of the pomander down the screws to see the ambergris, if you like. It's actually probably mixed with candle wax and beeswax, and when you hold it in your hand for long enough, 20 minutes watching EastEnders or something like that, and open your hand, you can smell this sort of weird nutmeggy smell coming from the period of sort of 1580 or something like that. And so that's the past writ large. Don't tell me that you can't find pomanders, because you can. One of the best pomanders in the British Museum, the case of it, is a Mudlarking find, a gold one set with pearls. So I should expect you to bring me a number of those next time. But the voyage of discovery is actually fanned out, if you like, by, this is a necklace called the Pennycuick jewels, and they were said to have been given by Mary Queen of Scots on the scaffold to Margaret Gillies, who was her maid of honour. And when this discovery had happened with the pomander, I got in touch with the National Museums of Scotland, and I say, do the beads of the Pennycuick jewels unscrew? So they said, oh, we'll go and have a wee look and see. And, so they did, and they found little scrapings of musk balls, if you like, on the inside. The technique is very similar. Benvenuto Cellini says in the 1530s, we are much engaged by making crosses and necklaces and beads loaded with musk, which is what this is. Now, I think probably you all know that musk and scent is a prophylactic thing. It keeps the plague away. And in an age where there's no knowledge of virus, no knowledge of bacteria. So I think that's a marvellous bit of open cast archaeology with links to Mary Queen of Scots. Talking of her, there she is. Donkeys years ago was asked to put together an exhibition of bits of jewellery that were suggested had something to do with Mary Queen of Scots, and virtually none of them do, because Queen Elizabeth I was so keen to obscure her memory. Everything was to be burnt, there would be no relics, everything possible wiped away, because this was regicide, and it was also a heresy to execute an anointed sovereign and your cousin. So anyway, what had survived is a cameo at Welbeck Abbey, and I was very lucky to be able to handle this thing. And some months went past, and I went to Gray's Market and was looking along the showcases. I went sort of hunter-gatherer's gaze, which you guys all have, I know you do. Don't pick up the Coke cans, do you? No, you do something else. Anyway, so it's a visual memory, which I'm lucky to have. And then this thing wolf-whistled me from the case. Right, you know, it seemed to, and it was £425, and I had 2 young sons and a mortgage. So again, still no carpet, frankly. But I did buy it, and so I thought, well, the first stop is to write to the National Museums of Scotland and say, what do you think of this, kids? So they wrote back and they said, oh, it doesn't relate to any portrait types or coin types. Well, it did actually. And then they said, but we have a small purchase grant, and we'll be very happy to know if it were offered for sale. So I thought, well, that's game, set and match. So I kept it, and I lent it to the National Museums of Scotland, where you can see it to this day, and it's still mine, and it will be mine when I get when I join the turf club, as they say. But anyway, that's and it's possible that this is an early representation of her as a widow from France. There's another very interesting, she's a dowager Dauphine of France, if not Queen of France. She's Queen of France. And more interestingly enough, although nobody seems to remember it, that every sovereign of the United Kingdom is descended from her, not the ginger one, from her. So the present king is descended from Mary Queen of Scots, and her emblem when she was born, she was a queen regnant at 3 days old, and she said, "In my end is my beginning." It was quite chilling, isn't it? But she meant that she was going to heaven when she died. But in my end is my beginning, because she can lay claim to the entire lineage of the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. Which ain't nothing, is it? So now here's another one. Now don't forget the earlier Pomander button. And this thing popped up at Christie's South Kensington, and it was described as 19th century, which it patently obviously wasn't. And this is a bit like a bet on a horse, because to be perfectly honest, I got very strong vibes from it, probably based on the earlier one that you'd seen. And I thought, well, I'm going to go full tilt at it, and I did. And it was sealed up, so it looked as if it could be a big gold button, certainly something very early. probably something 16th century. Anyway, I sat in the back of the auction room in heavy disguise, as Dame Edna, as it happens to be, and it always throws them off. Anyway, and bid, and got it. And so then I was sort of wondering about its function and took it to a rather robust jewellery firm and said, what's going on here? And he said, well, I'll put it under the flame and we'll blow the top off, which isn't conservation practice in every museum. And so he blew the top off, and I'm just hoping we're going to see, there it is, and the top is unscrewable clearly, and it goes like that, so it's to release these smells, these unguents, these protective devices against plague and all manner of evil. So it is a button. Now, what's also interesting is that, and it gives it a very, very early date, is that, and this is something for you guys as well, that the thread is not a tap as we know from every car, everything under the sun. It's actually filigree, because they hadn't got the means to turn a tap. So this is a filigree going in that direction, but it's also going that direction. And that points to a very early date. In the Museum of London, not too far away from here, they've got a scent bottle from the 15th century with that technique, and Hazel, who works there, alerted me to this. So that was another huge excitement. And I'll tell you all about all these things later on. But then I thought pomegranates, because it is a stylized pomegranate, this curious little flower at the front, and in our age, which you all share, because you can find out stuff that was quite impossible for somebody of my age who's older than the Pyrenees. We couldn't do these things, but now we can. And guess who's there? This is Doge Gritty by Titian, and of course it's a world-class picture. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing work of art, but you can see here that some of these buttons have an eerie resemblance to the one from Christie's South Kensington, described as 19th century. But we can't say it is, because we simply can't. What we can say is that the Doge was wearing pomegranates as buttons because he identified with Aaron in the Bible. And God said to Aaron, the lawgiver, you must wear a cloak with pomegranates down and bells down your front. So I think what the Doge is saying, I am the lawgiver, therefore I will. So it's all a bit open cast, and there isn't a smell of mud anywhere, not even a spatter. And there you see it, I think, quite vividly. I don't know. Anyway, we'll never know. I'm absolutely not suggesting it's the very one. It may just alert people to a fashion. Now, and this is Portobello Road, no mud down there. And this is a very recent find, and it's pomander time again. There's a lot of pomanders going on here, but this is a pomander for the hair. I think it's absolutely minute. It's sort of sugared almond size, and for these enormous coiffures in the 16th and 17th century, they ornamented them, if you were rich enough, with pearls. They're called bodkins, and yes, just like that. Anyway, so this is what I believe this is, and the date, as we've now learned, is important, because there's our filigree join. But anyway, back again. It's loaded with all kinds of imagery of the natural world. The top of it is the birds of the air, and then I think this must be the sea, because underneath, as far as I remember, there are fishy people going on. But it can be loaded again with scent, and so that's Portobello Road. So I want to see you all down there when you're not squelching, and we'll see what happens next. Portobello Road again, and this is gold, and it's a very misunderstood object, because a lot of people might, even in the audience, say this is a teething stick, and you might be right sometimes, but not always, but there's a background knowledge of coral working here. Coral is very powerful anti-magic, and has been so, particularly for children, since the 15th century. And Piero della Francesca's painting of the Christ child has a twig of coral hanging here on the Christ child, and it was thought to protect the child from the evil eye and possibly even diseases of the chest, which is very powerful. Anyway, Portobello Road, that's that, and it has the mark of a woman here, a hallmark for a woman. We know that because it's in a lozenge shape and not a shield shape, because you girls, I'm sorry to say, don't often go into battle. So you don't have a shield, you have a lozenge for your arms, and that pervades hallmarks. This is an English woman's goldsmith's mark from the 1640s. And how do we know it's 1640? Well, have a look here. And I mean, it's a great scream of delight when you have something like this and walk into the National Portrait Gallery, and there, to all intents and purposes, is something enormously similar. I didn't quite hit. And so you want to hug the poor tourist beside you. You may not be ready for this, and you can get into trouble. So don't do it. Anyway, so this is the 1640s, and it's a family. Oh God, I've forgotten their name. I might get it in a minute. A very prominent royalist. This poor chap was executed by the parliamentarians. But this is the heir, and he's wearing a red ribbon, which is also contributes to sort of anti-magic, and the coral too. The coral is sometimes believed to be the fossilized blood of Christ, and even that more convincingly of the Medusa. It's said that when Perseus knocked her head off, her blood ran into the river and became coral. So maybe nonsense, I don't know. Anyway, but it's the power of the anti-magic of the Medusa, which is important. It comes a lot from Naples. We've got 2 Italians sitting in the audience here, there may be more. And if you go to Naples, you'll find talismans made of coral, little root-shaped one, to which this has a relationship. Still no mud. And then just to really ram the point home, before you all nod off, this is it, and that's the painting behind. You can see it isn't the one, but it's almost certainly the same hand, the little florets here. And anyway, I didn't kiss the tourist beside me because she really didn't want it. and aiglets, I know you're aigletty people, aren't you? Yes, you are. And aiglets are found, the meaning of aiglets is simply a stiff end to a lace. You find them on your shoes. There's a see a pair here, right here. Jason has got 4 aiglets on his feet. And anyway, so that's the meaning of them, and they're to thread into dress through eyelets. And they exist on every level. There are base metal ones, silver ones. But I have to say, I had absolutely no idea quite what these, well, I knew they were aiglets, and they were described as earrings in the Portobello Road, but I didn't have any reference books, and I wasn't quite sure of my ground. But I bought them, and I simply couldn't find another pair of this extravagance anywhere. And they are enamelled gold from the 1640s, and they point to somebody of enormously high status, and we'll to see who and why that is. Because they are worn in profusion mainly. They'd have several going down like that, but anyway, they're painted with flowers. The meaning of flowers is another whole ball game. We don't have time for all of that, but there is a subliminal message coming from them to the wearer. But they are of enormously high status because they're at the height of luxury to have gold aiglets and painted enamelled gold ones. And it brings this old boy into play, King Charles I. And you can see, I hope you can, that his undershirt is weighted with aiglets here. And as if that wasn't enough, they hang over his rather fancy socks. Nightmare and the tumble dryer, imagine. But anyway, and there you can see them again. And the dating, the chronology is absolutely right. And we can't tell from the picture, maddeningly, whether they have any relationship with it whatsoever. What I can tell you is that when these 2 aiglets move together, they issue the tiniest little sound, a sort of tinkling sound. So when the king entered the room, you might even have heard his aiglets, which is quite good. And be listening for when you leave later to see what your aiglets are doing. Anyway, so there we are. Provenance, luck. and wait, a watchful wait, because you don't always find what you're looking for just like that, and the Almighty might not present it to you, but when you do, a whoop of excitement. This is a memorial brooch for Lord Nelson, and this turned up under the hammer, and again, you can see my fascination with autobiography, if you like, in jewellery. I'm very bored with just jewels, and so I want things of importance, in this case national importance. I mean, this is what he was, you know, Nelson's column, the saviour of England and of particularly of England. But anyway, there it was, and there's a panel in the back, and in the traditional mourning jewellery, you might expect that to be hair. But it doesn't look it, because it looks like silk. And so I thought there's only one way to solve this. I took it to a fellow who has a scanning electron microscope. Have you got them? You probably do. Anyway, and he put it underneath there, and it is human hair. So why should it not be Lord Nelson's hair? I think in all probability it is, because it's an enamelled gold brooch for somebody, again, of enormously high rank, who would receive a piece of the hair. That was what was important, not the brooch. And yet it's a ghost without a voice at the moment, because I can't find a record of these presentation jewels. But I'm happy where I am with that one.
The statue's right beside you.
But I didn't. Yes, there he is. That's Lord Nelson there. Hard to underestimate, you know, his victory, really, because Napoleon was a bit of a stinker, you know. He was a bit of a Putin, really. This is where we're racing ahead here. This is a brooch. It's this size. There'll be a chance for you to see all of these things later on. Not right now, but later. But this is about this big, and came across my desk, and because I was getting a bit of a reputation to be interested in Victorian things, which it perfectly obviously is, and then I picked it up, and on the back here it said, "From Albert, the 10th of February 1843. Now this was donkeys years ago, probably 40 years ago, but that brain cell was still flickering on like an old Christmas tree light. Anyway, and I realised it wasn't Albert Tatlock from Coronation Street. It was, in fact, the Prince Consort. But again, a bit of a hunch, no computers. And so the only way forward is to write to the Royal Archives at Windsor and say, what's in Queen Victoria's journal for the 10th of February 1843? So I get a real stiff letter back from Windsor Castle. And it said, Queen Victoria's journal, she says, my beloved Albert has given me an open work gold brooch, which is so original in design, and it is set with 4 freshwater pearls from Scotland. So it's the 3rd wedding anniversary brooch, and when it was a great love affair, and they recently discovered Scotland. They were there in July 1842, and this thing is made in February 1843 with 4 freshwater pearls from Scotland, and then thence onwards, when they had discovered it, Balmoral is where we all know who wants to go there, don't we? So it's a very long tradition, and it's something from her heart, and I hope to make you weep in the end. I'm going to work on it. You get your tissues out, because anyway, this is another, I suppose, just a bit of a discovery, really. This turned up at another auction room in Knightsbridge, and it was with a group of other things of royal provenance, and I thought, well, I'll have a tilt at those. The auctioneer was so ponderous, and I sat there for 3.5 hours, and I did a, Edna Everidge thing. I just stormed it. I can't be bothered with this, and so I left. And then I thought that was very stupid. You could have waited. And so then I tentatively rang up and said, what happened to the bits? Thinking that, and they said, well, a majority of them were bought in. They were unsold. And so I was able to buy this one, which is a tinted photograph of Princess Victoria, who is a daughter of Queen Victoria, and was sent age 16 as a bride to the Prussian court, and she was accompanied by Baroness Churchill, nothing to do with the Churchill. And so this brooch was given to her as a thank you for taking her to the German court as a bride. And I think you can see it probably better than me. I think it says, can you read it? I can't. Anyway, the important point is that it says Princess Victoria above there. And anyway, it's her name going around it in blue enamel. And a tinted photograph. The photograph's quite important. Now, here's yet more Queen Victoria things. This was flapping around in the trade. It's not beautiful, is it? Come on, let's face it. It looks like a sort of kind of supernatural cushion somewhere, isn't it? But anyway, and a blue enamel for love, a star, a pearl, and then on the inside it says from Her Majesty 1857 with the hair of the royal children in the back. And I don't know why it was within sight, it just was, and so I snitched that one. It's still an enigma because we don't know to whom it was given, and these days that's a bit more public. Maybe we will one day. There was a very famous, a very favourite teacher, governess, who they absolutely adored, so I think that's a prime candidate. The hair looks absolutely disgusting. It's best looking the other way, really. This is a more recent find. It's turned up at yet another sale room, and it's made quite simply of granite, bound in gold and enamelled with what look like laurels, tied with the base. They're not laurels, but we'll explain. And this is actually a pebble, the very pebble, discovered by Queen Victoria in 1887, I think, and it was discovered in a place called Loch Dew, which is where she and Albert, by this time dead, spent their happiest times. So she had found this stone and gave it to her daughter as an engagement present, Princess Louise, who was marrying the Marquis of Lorne, and so that, I think, damage has happened, which put the rest of the tradesmen off. Why the rest of the tradesmen were put off, I have no idea, because on the back is the provenance. Loch Dew, October 1870, I ought to know this, 78, from VR, from Victoria Regina, and to her daughter, Princess Louise, who was to marry the Marquis of Lorne, and so that's good enough, really. There's an account from her saying to the Marquis of Lorne, I'm sending you a little stick pin with the granite I found in the pavement at Loch Dew, and Louise has the same as a brooch, so that was that. But this has come up completely without provenance in an auction room. And so I could glue a bit back on there. But what's important to say is that Loch Dew, she was so obsessed with her widow, being a widow and a mournful widow for 40 years, I might add. And she never stopped banging on about it, but she would impinge on everybody else's happiness by reminding them of her happiness at Loch Dew. But anyway, and then National Portrait Gallery, Princess Louise, Marchioness of Lorne, wearing it, which I think is hugely exciting, and as a sort of stretching provenance, trying to find out stuff. And again, I went through all the photographs in the National Portrait Gallery, and there it was, and there was a whoop of excitement. Princess Louise wasn't a particularly happy person, and it's suggested that the erotic landscape of the Marquis of Lorne did not include women. So I think that thought with you. So there were no children. And anyway, here's a funny little thing. There was actually offered for sale by a descendant of Queen Victoria, and there were a number of other things, and we did actually buy them. And after she had left, I turned it over. I hope I got a slide of this. And it says on the back, Christmas 1861. Now, Prince Albert died 14 days before Christmas 1861, and the Queen was devastated by his death. And the reason that is interesting is that this is a diamond forever and a turquoise for true love. It's a very sort of discordant combination. It doesn't matter because it's tiny, and a crown above. It's not a royal crown. And there you see the last image of the Prince Consort and the Queen. We know on what day these were taken, what hour they were taken. We know everything about this. And there was the strongest implication that this is the posthumous gift from Prince Albert to the Queen, because we know he was giving things before Christmas. They were wrapped and ready to go to everybody. So this was an enormously sad and wonderful thing to see. Oh, there it is, Christmas 1861. He was 14 days dead in his coffin, and when she not quite, even later, you can see here, dined with dear Marie and went over to Theodore's room. Dear uncle came upstairs for a short while, also Bertie. Alice gave me my beloved Albert's Christmas present, so precious and so sad. Ooh. And then she wrote to her uncle at about this time saying, my life as a happy one is ended, the world is gone from me. So this is jewellery being quite punchy, isn't it? It's not the girls and pearls in country life all the time, is it? But the world came back with a rather fascinating friendship, and I use that in the most guarded terms because this is John Brown, the famous gillie, and he was approved of by Albert, so that was a pretty good credential. He spoke, he was a sort of noble savage, if you like. I'm not sure we're allowed to say things like that anymore, but anyway, that's what he was, a tribesman, if you like, in Scotland, and spoke only the truth and directly to her, and saved her life from assassins on 2 occasions. That firms up a friendship, doesn't it, I think? And there were 6 attempts on her life, which is astounding. 2 without blanks in them, but we don't know that. Anyway, he saved her from that. So that does explain quite a lot, I think. It's still one of the most enigmatic relationships of all, but I think she was desperately lonely, and then death stalked her all the time, and death was very much part of her life beyond Albert. And astonishingly, he got an infection in his face and died on the 27th of March 1883, and then she embarked on an enormous number of commemorative sculptures and I don't know what else, pins for everybody. This is the only one that says Dear John. Don't forget there's a gulf of rank, enormous gulf of rank, because Queen Victoria is a Queen Regnant of the United Kingdom and Empress of India, presiding over 2/3 of the world's surface, 3/4 of its population, and this is her friend. So she wasn't a snob, really, I think you could say that, couldn't you? And it says from VRI, from Victoria, Queen and Empress, with the hair of John Brown in the back. So that turned up rather circuitously, but I don't want to bore you all to sobs with this, but anyway, I did manage to get it in the end. It was offered on the wings of the film Mrs. Brown, I think it was Billy Connolly, and it came up with an enormous estimate, but actually much later on it was less so. This is a very, you can see it's almost by the same hand, and undoubtedly is. This is also from Queen Victoria commemorating her daughter, Princess Alice, who died of diphtheria on exactly the same day, the 14th of December, as the Prince Consort had died some years earlier. And the Queen was very stricken with that, but she said that she couldn't really believe that they both died on the same day. What is interesting, and it's one of the last photographs of Princess Alice, she's wearing a pearl and diamond brooch here, which was contrived by Prince Albert and the Queen to give to her, but the Queen had to present it as a widow afterwards, and so it's all heavily autobiographical, and this is the power of these small tiny things, which you can see, and I'm going to tell you why. It says from VRI, the monogram, Victoria, Queen and Empress, and the most powerful person in the world without a shadow of doubt. These things come from her heart. I don't know where to find them in the river, maybe one. This is a mourning jewel. It's almost too sort of Adams family for words. And I've never seen anything like it, to be perfectly honest. It's like Thing from the Adams family, do you remember? And it's tiny and silver, and it's a sculpture, the cast of the dead man's hand that's been reduced mechanically to a tiny thing like this, made by Hunt and Roskell, who are jewellers to the Queen. It's a very interesting thing because it has initials on the inside, and somebody's actually established who the recipient was, who's an industrialist. The commemoration was for, was an industrialist who died with a vast fortune of £34,000, but he was also the father-in-law. It has a link with Oscar Wilde. I think Oscar Wilde could have seen this, and I like to think he did. But anyway, that's a tiny, tiny memorial brooch, the like of which I've never seen before, and I don't expect to see it again. Now, this is more of a relationship. Next to nothing has got to do with mudlarking, but these are two brooches designed by Pugin, who designed the interior of the Palace of Westminster. And we've already talked about mudlarking on the banks of the Palace of Westminster, and what it can show in terms of the porcelain and things. But just over the wall, Pugin was designing the interior, and so this is jewellery on a very high level of architectural interest, and these correspond to a note in the Bible where it says, I'm trying to get this right, consider the lilies of the field, how they prosper. They toil not, neither do they spin. But I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory is not arrayed like one of these. And so this is, if you like, an ecclesiastical jewel for a Catholic patronage. And just, if you like, it's the Palace of Westminster boiled down on the back stove, you know, rendered down into something tiny, no bigger than that. This is a bracelet that's related to it as well, designed by Pugin as a gift, designed by John Hardman Powell to Pugin's design for his wife, who was Anne Pugin, Pugin's daughter. You see her monogram here, and the date of her wedding underneath. So biographical stuff. It's extremely beautiful, this one. Some of the things I'm showing you are not. But anyway, it's documented, and it's related to one of the great geniuses of 19th century architecture. Anyway, this is it looks very punky, doesn't it? You wouldn't expect to mess with her, I'll tell you. Don't. And it's a bracelet from Rajasthan, and it's gilt metal, and it's very spirited. And every time I show it to anybody, the girls want to put it on and threaten me with it. And but anyway, that's not going to be possible for reasons I'll tell you later. But I'll tell you to whom it belonged. And there she is, Dame Edith Sitwell, and she obviously loved it. It's the dottiest, most marvellous photograph of her. But she also wore it in the role of Lady Macbeth, surprise, surprise. That bracelet, and there's a photograph of her doing exactly that. She said that she wore this enormous jewellery because she thought that she was so impossibly ugly that it drew attention away from her face. It didn't stop her being photographed many, many times. Amazing character. So there's a piece of jewellery, if you like, dragged out of obscurity. It came up at Roseberry's in South London, and I did know of it, and I knew its provenance, but that had fallen away, and so it's only gilt metal, and it's utterly worthless in terms of intrinsic value, but it's got a personality and a half, and it's haunted by Dame Edith Sitwell. So we're getting to the end of all this blabber. I'm sorry to bang on like this. and so here's an enormous pink topaz. Now topazes usually appear as sort of Madeira coloured, they're sort of browny, butterscotchy things. And when subjected to enormous heat, they turn pink, but they never achieve the pinkness of this, which is very intense and shot with red. And this is a stone from Siberia, and like a lot of the things I'm interested in, it's got a whacking great history. And I gave a talk, not unlike this, on sort of February the 10th or something, in somewhere up north, and I did actually wonder what on earth I was doing there, because it was very dark and cold, and I was fed up, and so I came back, and about 6 months later, the jeweller who'd been sitting in the audience, and I got a pink topaz I'd like you to look at and to buy. And so